This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
That one of the most dominant strategies that people utilize in order to engender courage is to link up their actions to something bigger than themselves, right? So when you think about purpose, you're really asking the question, like, who or what does this courage serve? And what identities might be helpful in acting in a courageous fashion?
So very rarely have I run into somebody who is in the same sandbox as me. And also, I mean, like, it's not just like the same sandbox, like leadership, like you are in the courage sandbox. Like we are both in the exact same sandbox. And today's guest, although granted you're 3,000 miles away from me, I mean, we both have this passion for the concept of courage. And Rui, your journey to this word is pretty fascinating. I mean, you came out of like faculty. I mean, you were at Columbia for teaching. And I'm curious if you stumbled into courage there and then curiosity got the best of you, which is how you're now the CEO and the founder of NextArrow. But can you give a little bit of your journey to courage and how it catapulted you into this new world?
Well, Ryan, thank you. Thank you for having me on this podcast. And my journey towards courage, interesting question. First of all, sandbox. Yes, we're playing, right? This is fun. This is playful. Everything I learned about courage, I probably learned in kindergarten, in the sandbox, or watching my kids in the sandbox or in the playground as well. Happy to chat about that. I think that there's always been a part of me that like really resonated with courage, like ever since I was a little kid. And I had experienced challenges as a little kid. I had a kidney removed when I was 6 years old. And like, I remember like a conversation with my mom about like having the courage to like do something like this and inspiring other kids in the hospital also and playing there together. And just throughout my life, I grew up in Israel. I was born and raised there. It's a place with a lot of courage and a lot of chutzpah. And then having the courage to leave my country, to follow my heart. I fell in love. I came to the United States and I went into academia and I studied there. And eventually, as I think about like just steps I've taken in my life, they're all guided by the principles and values around courage.
Now we got to explain what chutzpah means because we just lost half of our audience. How would you define chutzpah?
Chutzpah is, I would define it as just having gall and verve to do the things that you need to do. Yeah.
It's a little je ne sais quoi. We just use another language, right? Like, so the moxie. It's the moxie.
Yes, for sure.
Well, look, I do. It's so funny. I wonder if you feel this way too. And I don't think I would go all the way back to my sandbox. But I will say, before I had any sort of relationship to the word courage, like, oh, wait a minute, there's something here. Is I do feel that I was given a pretty good opportunity to run at the things I wanted to do. Like at the age of 8, I was on an airplane to summer camp that was 2 states away because it looked fun.
Yeah.
Like I was free range. You know, I came home from school, I got on my bike, I went and found what field are we playing? What game are we playing and where? And as long as I was home when the lights were down, we were good. There was no questions asked, you know? So that muscle was built early for me. You know, the fascination of going to school in New York, or like the very day I graduated, I moved to New York City. You know, what do you mean? Like there was no other way. And so I wonder if that's what you mean by sandbox.
Yeah. Well, the movement is interesting, right? Because it's a physical and psychological dislocation that you're experiencing when you move to a new place, a new territory. And I did this when I moved to the United States. I moved also from the United States to Barcelona. I moved back to the United States, different places there as well. But when I think about, Sandbox, Ryan, I know you're a dad. I'm a dad. I have a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old. And I see courage all around me in the playground. Like when I look at them, and I imagine I had this as well, and I can think of some episodes of my own life, but just like watching these kids in the playground, and especially one of my kids, I remember him trying to climb on some contraption, and I saw his legs shake. They were literally shaking as he was trying to do this, and then he got to the other side, and I'm like, that's courage, right? It's like your legs are shaking, but you keep going and you get to the other side itself. And so I had that as a child. I dealt with bullies as a child as well. I had moral courage as a child, physical courage as a child. And I kept up with it, and then kind of developed the concept in a more academic way and in a way that we speak about it today. But without calling it courage, I think it's something that really resonated with my heart. And I see it all around me. I see it in my kids. I see it everywhere though. Like we're courageous creatures.
I think once you find something that you love, right, it's the old, you get what you focus on, right? Like you can't help but see it, what you focus on. One of my old guests, Mandy Salas, used to say, what you focus on gets bigger. And I think there's truth to that. So you come to the States and, did you, at the time, did you think you were going to go into academia? Was that the thought?
I fell in love. I was a heavy metal musician at the time.
Yeah.
I pictured my life like I was going to be a musician. That was it. That was my path. That was my bliss. This is the thing that I wanted to follow. But I fell in love with a very brainy lady, and she got me into academics. And it actually started with a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces and The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell, which talks about the hero's journey and courage, and probably that resonated as well. But yeah, I started through her and just wanting to impress her and her parents, and got into the world of academia that way. And eventually, like the bass guitar started collecting dust, although it's still here. I can pick it up.
Yeah, I like her strategy. She's like, no, I can't bring a musician. We need to make a little bit of money. We're going to move you over into this bucket. You want to stay with me? Let's go.
Right. Yeah. And academically, eventually I got into the field of conflict analysis and resolution and negotiation. And, coming in from Israel, this is something that was also something that has always interested me. But I didn't think about this in an academic way. And so started exploring that world too.
I mean, you've taught courses on conflict management and negotiation.
Yeah.
Pretty solid spots. I mean, Columbia, Princeton, John Jay. That sort of moment in your life. I mean, that is courage, right? It is calming and understanding scenarios, but then taking action on, again, how do you apply what you learned in those arenas with the work you do now?
Yeah. It takes a lot of courage. And by courage, I mean, we can define the terms like the willingness to take some kind of worthwhile risks or meaningful risks. And I think that when you're in a state of conflict with somebody else, there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of threat that is involved. And to approach it with more curiosity and less criticality and more imagination takes some courage on our behalf. And so I think there is a connection there. And there's a lot of the skills that we focus on today are skills that I first encountered studying conflict analysis and resolution and negotiation.
So this is a little behind the curtain on my world, but you're getting me thinking about my style, because there's a lot of keynotes and workshops that come now with my world. And I think about when I walk into a room, to me, there is negotiation, and it is for some conflict management, right? Like, they know this is a conversation about courage, which means in essence, it's a conversation about something probably needs to change. And that sure sounds like conflict management to me. And then I think about my own style of my cadence and my speaking, and where did that come from? I can't help but think of you would have been a great lawyer as I read some of what your background was. And I probably say that because my dad was a lawyer, and my dad, he's in his 80s now, still works, by the way. But my style is almost a perfect cocktail of my parents. It's my dad who's a lawyer, and you think about a jury, and you're just trying to present the right first fact and have the discipline to not move on to the second fact until you've established the first fact, and then you can move on to the second fact, and then you can establish the third fact, and then you can my mother was a school teacher. We're back to the sandbox. She was a third grade school teacher, and she brought the tact, she brought the warmth and the love, and it's like, okay, is everybody following along? Are we all in this together? So I had this sort of nice cocktail of my parents, of understanding that I don't know where you are on this journey. I actually have to make sure I meet everyone in the audience where they are. And some of them might be already ready for the third fact, but I got to start at the first fact. And you know that I know this, and then we move on to we stack onto that, and then we stack onto that, but then pepper in some of that mom. When you think about your style, because you've been in front of classrooms, there's some play in that. Like, do you feel that's similar to you?
As far as combination of like your mom and dad, or is it a combination of playfulness, bringing playfulness into this kind of work?
I think it's more playfulness, because I'm sure you've
yeah. Oh my gosh, the work that we do today and the work that I do with NextArrow, like playfulness is huge. I think when I design trainings for leaders and for teams, like the brainy and the playful, that like they both have to be there. And that means like I create like let's say a psychological safety, a psych safety workshop based on like a murder mystery, or presentation workshop that's designed like a video game, or a critical and creative thinking workshop that's designed like a comic book. And the playfulness component is such an important aspect of learning. And again, you see it in the way our kids learn, you see it in how people respond to the material. So I definitely have that. It's a way of also like upping your warmth. You know, like the way you're describing your mom and your dad, you're thinking, you know, it's both warmth and competence. Like both of those components need to be there. And I bet they both had that in spades. It's not like your mom is warmth and your dad is competence. Like to be an effective lawyer, you need both. Right?
Totally.
You need to connect with the audience.
Rui, it depends if I had kept my lights on when I was 10. Who left the lights on in the house? Like that's a whole nother.
So both of those components are really, really essential for me today. Is like, how do I constantly think about upping my warmth with the audience and upping levels of competence in the work that I do. Can I deliver on my intentions? And am I being perceived as a friend as opposed to a foe to the people that I'm trying to influence?
You are playing some good sandboxes right now. I mean, I know you've done work with Twitch and Sony. You know, the skills that you're helping these organizations, leaders develop, and really the courage. I mean, I've always seen courage as a muscle, right? And it's funny, when I think of my personal values, one of my values is excellence. And it's like, I don't think it's pretentious. It's just the way I'm wired, right? I want to be great. I want to surround myself with people that want to be great. And that can be hard to admit when I live, 5 miles from a beach, and you can just be lazy and hang out at the beach. But that's just the way we're wired here. And I think the work you're doing is to help leaders achieve excellence, right? And so talk to me a little about how NextArrow goes about doing that. And maybe a good place to start this part of the conversation is, and I have my formula for courage, but you have your formula for courage. Can you share? And again, if you listen to this show, you know my formula at this point. It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage. Rui's giving me some love on the book, Return on Courage. Now, so you clearly know our formula.
Yes.
But I also really like your formula. Can you share your formula?
Yeah, sure. So our mission as an organization is to help leaders and teams develop both the skills and the courage for sustained excellence. And we think about courage as the link, the bridge between knowing and doing, which is an essential part of your formula as well. And that is like, I know that I need to give feedback, but to do it is hard. And I know I need to give I need to present, and the doing might be hard. Speaking in public might be difficult, or I need to set boundaries, or I need to give feedback, but the doing is hard. So courage helps create that bridge. And this is why it's in our mission. It's why it's so freaking important. The formula for it is slightly different than yours. It's courage equals power times purpose divided by dragons, naturally, dragons. And you can think of power here as capacity to action, and purpose being reason to action, and the dragon in the denominator being resistance to action. So really, you take this formula and you think about, what area do I need to work on? Do I need to up the numerator? Do I need to decrease the denominator? And that's the courage formula.
I mean, you can't just throw in dragons and then kind of matador around it. So let's talk about it. And the irony, I like that you went less cliche than me out of the gate, because we have our lion, right? We have our lion, and you've got dragons. And what the world missed was you drinking your tea this morning out of a dragon mug that I believe one of your kids made for you, which is pretty cool. So let's talk about, just in the spirit of this, where dragons came from when you landed on it. And it's kind of pretty cool also, Rui, that we talked about the power play, and my immediate take just off of what you shared is you're just trying to cut the tension a little bit. It's already hard enough. And dragons is that play. It is that warmth and confidence coming together. You can't not smile and be like, what's the dragon we're trying to slay here?
Yeah. Or ride. One of our core values at NextArrow is ride the dragon, which is also, it's a nod to Ronnie James Dio, if you know. But the dragons, so I should say that when we speak about dragons, we're emphasizing Western dragons as opposed to like dragons as conceived of in China and in Japan, which is like a powerful, positive symbol, vitality of life. It means something very different than what it means in the European West and what we've inherited. For us here, dragon is a symbol for anxiety and for fear and for doubt and for ego and for all the stuff that's going to get in the way of you achieving your goals. And so what we try to do is give people the tools to identify those dragons and shrink those dragons. So for example, one of my favorite tools is something that we call a dragon audit. And it's a type of risk assessment, which basically ask and answer two questions. The first question is, what scares me about this action? Like, what's the potential cost of this action I'm about to take? And the second question is, what's the potential cost of inaction? What scares me about not doing this thing? And we've had hundreds of people and thousands actually by now fill this out. And it's really interesting to see like what they put in these two categories. And doing this helps people organize their thinking. So they bring a potential future into the present in thinking about, okay, here's what I'm concerned with. Here's how I'm going to organize my thinking and plan for it. It helps reduce some of those fears, those negative fears. So it takes away some of the potency, some of the oxygen from the fear itself. And it helps engender courage. So if you allow me just a little bit more on this, I'll explain what I mean by that. So when most people fill this out, the first column, what scares me about having this conversation with this person, that's like a courageous conversation scenario. People will say things like, well, I'm afraid that I'm going to hurt them or demotivate them. I'm going to damage my relationship with them. Or I might say something wrong or they might dislike me. And this is very natural. What's interesting is a lot of the things that they write are focused inwards on themselves. But the second column, the focus becomes outwards. So if we don't have this conversation, I'm afraid that it's going to impact the team, or it's going to impact our mission or a business or a client or a process or my family or whatever it may be. Now, what does this have to do with courage? What we see in the literature and the psychology of courage is that one of the most dominant strategies that people utilize in order to engender courage is to link up their actions to something bigger than themselves. And that's what that second column is all about. And that's why it's so powerful.
Well, that feels like the purpose part of power times purpose, right?
Exactly.
The purpose is the bigger than yourself component, right?
that connects to purpose, right? So when you think about purpose, you're really asking the question, like, who or what does this courage serve? And what identities might be helpful for me in acting in a courageous fashion? Like, that's really the core aspect of the purpose, and thinking about the link up that you can make and the identities, self-transcendent identities that have courageous action tendencies.
It just dawned on me that a guy that comes from academia, of course, would have like a power times purpose divided by like that makes more sense. Mine's just simple, like this plus this, knowledge plus faith plus action.
I love that you have faith there, Ryan. I thought, I was reading your book. I thought that's a cool component of it, right? It's not just the knowledge leading right to action. There's something in between that, and the faith part, I think, is really interesting.
Well, we still each have our three, right? There's power, there's purpose, and there's dragons for you. And I like that you've got the dragons component, because I feel like, I pull the Ryan Berman string the amount of times I've said we're corporate fear fighters, right? And what is a fear fighter? And as a music fan, then usually I start with, we're not Foo Fighters, we're not a band, we're fear fighters. And our job is to hunt down, and to use your language, the dragons inside the organization that no one wants to talk about. Like, dragons should fly, right? They should not be on the ground. And that's the same thing. What we see is that people suppress fear versus address fear. And once you see a fear and it's real and it's out there and it's live with wings and all and the spirit of dragons, you can do something about it. It's when we don't talk about fear, we've suppressed it. And by the way, everybody kind of knows that's the fear. They're just not having that conversation. There was a study that I think LinkedIn put out that I don't know how many people they surveyed, but what came back was that 95% of the audience would rather bite their lip than express how they truly felt to management. And it's like, well, there you go. It's like, no, it's not that you didn't know. It's not that you didn't have the knowledge. Maybe you didn't have the faith that it would be addressed, so you took no action on it.
Yeah. I wonder if you added an item like eating live bugs, what would be the response there? What percentage of folks would rather eat live bugs than address these issues? Probably would be still pretty high, maybe not 95% for sure. I think coming back to your really excellent point on play, another tool that I use in helping people like deal with dragons is to name them. And there's the research. You probably heard like the phrase of like name it to tame it. So research that's done out of UCLA that shows that it's called affective labeling. Is that when you label an emotion, whether you do it internally or just out loud, you reduce some of you attenuate the emotion itself. But I wanted to, from the play perspective, I was like, what if you actually gave it a name and gave it a comical name? Give your fear a comical name, because humor and anxiety don't mesh well together. So imagine like the names you would give your own fears or your own dragons, and be like, here you say you're afraid of looking stupid in front of others, and you name your dragon like Numbskull. So you're like, here comes Numbskull, right? Or you have fear of like imposter syndrome, and like here comes Fradus or Frodus, or whatever name you want to give to your dragon. And we find that when we ask people to do that, it creates some psychological distance between them and their fears, and it makes it more manageable. And so that's another tool that you can use to add play into the mix.
So you're giving me an opportunity to plug Headamentals, because right now I'm channeling my inner Dr. Susie Burke, who was one of our co-authors. And in Headamentals, we talk about your self-talk. And it's time we talked about how self-talk connects to team talk, and that you've got a monster in your mind. And that monster is what's driving that self-talk. And she always presents, name your monster, like actually name your monster. And she went the path of Alexandra. So when that little voice, she gave it an endearing name. And I'm like, why wouldn't you give it I kind of went the humor path. Like, why wouldn't you give it like something that can like take the sting out of your monster's name? And it's funny, we just had an opportunity to present at Harvard. And as we went around, it was Rhett Power, who's our third partner too on the book. We shared our monster's name. At the time, Alexandra was Susie's, Will was Rhett's, and my monster name at the time was dun, 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 Monster. And then it was like, well, way to be so creative. But this is breaking news. I actually, in the last 10 days, have finally named my monster, and it's Iceman. And it's Iceman because the other voice in your mind, you've got a monster and you've got the Maverick. So you got, and to me, the Maverick, you can't have Mav, right? You can't have Maverick from Top Gun without Iceman. They're in the cockpit together. And so that is the relationship, though, that Mav is flying the plane and Iceman is that other little voice that's like, to me, that's naming my dragon. He's the one, for me, it's he, that's trying to like talk me out of doing whatever it needs to be doing or trying to keep me small. Mav's like, object, we're flying this plane, we're going.
Yeah. Well, at some point, I think Maverick and Iceman came together, right? They became one. So hopefully that's going to happen, right?
Well, I actually think it's the opposite. I think you want to keep them separate. I think you want to like keep the two of them from each other. And one of the flawed hypotheses going in was that you could defeat self-talk. And you go on the journey, and what we learned was, no, you can crack it. You got a roommate for life. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be there. There will be times, even for Jedis, where your monster, in my case, Iceman, is going to maybe remind me of something, of I'm not that smart, or it's going to do what it's going to do. And the taming mechanism of Maverick is to, okay, why are we telling ourselves that? Hey, maybe that's just a data point that I should be afraid right now. Well, that means I'm growing. That means I'm stretching. Here's my moment where courage can show up. So, we are very much of the mindset of you're really not taming fear. You want to bring it to the surface. You want to normalize it because we all have it. And then as an old guest on the podcast once said, Seth Godin used to say, you want to give fear gratitude and make it less scary and then go after it from there. Everyone has their own take on it, Rui. That's just one possible take.
Yeah, I like it. I like that you brought in Top Gun. That's
hey, I'm glad I got there finally. I want to talk about the power part of power times purpose. So give me what that means.
Yeah. So it's capacity for action. It's one thing to think, okay, how can I make peace with my fear and how can I manage my fear or transcend my fear, whatever approach we take to it. But if you don't have an ability to do what you want to do, you're not going to succeed in your goal. So if I see somebody who's drowning and I have a clear sense of like purpose and maybe I'm not afraid to try to save them, but I don't know how to swim, then I'm going to drown with them, most likely, right? So the power is developing that capacity to kind of impact your environment in that way. And there's different ways of doing this. I often emphasize on this loop between knowledge acquisition and knowledge application. So thinking about how do I learn, and then how do I apply what it is that I learn. And when, like, for example, let's say I have a fear of public speaking, and this is what I'm trying to overcome, then I might say, okay, I'm going to come up with a plan and I'm going to learn, I'm going to take a workshop on this. I'm going to watch people like Ryan speak. I'm going to interview people. I'm going to read some books. I'm going to acquire the knowledge. And then the next step is I'm going to apply the knowledge. And we have decades of research, Ryan, that shows us one of the most powerful ways to overcome your fears is to expose yourself to the very thing that scares you. And so the application component is really, really important, but you don't want to go in there just full throttle and be like, I'm afraid of public speaking, so let me put me on the TED stage. Like that's
Right.
That's not how you begin, right? So we call this like a courage rope, and you take gradual steps to achieve your goals. So it might be like, I'm going to speak up in a meeting. I'm going to ask a question at a meeting. And just think about like what next step might be. I'm going to appear on a podcast and have a conversation with somebody. And next step might be I'm going to speak in front of like my leadership team or whatever it may be. And you build up that courage that way, a courage muscle, as you said.
Yeah, it sounds like power really is skill and capacity, right? It's like the
Yeah.
more skill and capacity you have, the more you feel, I'm not sure if this is the right word, but the more in control, right? Or you feel like I can actually lean into this action because I'm qualified to do it.
Yes, right. So you have some sense of control. You know what's in your control. You can influence your environment in that way. You have a sense of self-efficacy, and I think that's really important. One thing that I like to do is I have a little something on my phone in my notes called Scrappy, and you have a courage scrapbook. And so every time to reinforce a behavior itself, like if I do something, I put it in there and I reinforce it. And there's some interesting research that shows that when you do this, you're more likely to remember it. And that allows you to become, or it helps you become more courageous in the future. So in one study, for example, they asked a bunch of folks, would you be willing to give a talk on racism to a group of neo-Nazis? Which takes a lot of courage to do.
I would say, or that's very reckless, depending if you're not prepared, but yes.
Yeah. And so, one group was a control group. The other group was asked to think about a time in which they acted courageously in the past. And that group was significantly more likely to do this act itself, right? To act courageously and to speak in front of this group. And so there's the element of helping you kind of fortify these memories and reminding you of who you are, your identity, and creating a sense of consistency with that identity in the future. So that's a way of reinforcing, that element, that power component of the equation as well.
I love that we're in the land of like hypothetical and theory, and we're moving into application, right? So in a world obsessed with growth hacks and like quick wins, and I'm not saying shortcuts, but like we're looking for wins along the way. From your experience, what's the most uncourageous behavior you see brands defaulting to? And in your opinion, what does choosing the harder, braver path actually look like?
So the first part of that question, it's there are a lot of ways you can answer that question. One thing that springs to mind is just looking across to your competitors and seeing what it is that they're doing, which is very uncreative and it's very boring and it doesn't get you very far, right? But it's safe. Say, okay, everybody's integrating their AI now. I'm going to do the same thing, and this is how I'm going to respond. So, I think that is, I wouldn't call it like necessarily like craven, but it's not a very courageous thing to do. I think the courageous path is having kind of clarity on what's a worthwhile risk and pursuing that, and that involves like doing some homework as to what's the risk and why is it worthwhile, to connecting that sense of purpose and what do we have to do to move forward, and then doing it.
Rui, of the brands and again, I'm not asking you to give any trade secrets away, but when you bring play into your clients, and by the way, how do your clients engage with you? Do you prefer workshops? Are they consulting arrangements? What does it look like?
Yeah. So it's training and coaching. So the vast majority of the work that we do, it falls into these two categories, and provide a 2-hour workshop on everything from like the psychology of courage workshops, courage at work, to psych safety, to courageous conversations, manager training, things of that nature. And also like one-on-one coaching and team coaching as well.
So what's the moment when like, okay, I've now created a safe enough condition to go have this convo? Like, give me some of your tools. And because let's be real, like there's people listening right now that they want to be better leaders. They want to be more courageous. They want their teams to hit the gas. Can you give them like a 1, 2, 3 on how to maybe slay the dragon, right? Weaken the denominator, as you say.
So the 1, 2, 3, Ryan, is, so let me back up because there's two separate questions that I'm hearing here. I mean, so one is like thinking about in a workshop setting, how do you create an environment where people are willing to take those interpersonal risks together, if I understood you correctly. And the other is coming back to the question of like, how do you reduce that denominator, the dragons in general? I like
it.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
So I think there are few ways in workshops to create a level of psychological safety. And then it is a challenge, right? Because you don't know the people. And they're coming together, and sometimes they're coming together, sometimes they're forced to be there, sometimes there are power dynamics in the room that you're not aware of, and you have to be thoughtful about this. There are a few different ways that we do this. I mean, one is that coming back to the idea of playfulness, so all of the workshops that we do are grounded in stories. So there's a story, there's a character in all our workshops. His name is Kai, who may or may not be named after my 7-year-old. And Kai goes on an adventure, and so it's an adventure that people can connect with and they can kind of relate with. And it all depends on like what is the story that we're telling there. So that's part of the playful elements as well. There's a place for humor that we incorporate a lot of humor. Again, anxiety and humor don't go well together. There's that. And then there's, of course, how you set up the room, and like how do you set up the conversations that people are going to have with one another. Like all of those things are really, really critical to kind of reduce the level of anxiety that people might have, and how you respond to people's questions and pushback, and how you invite those things. Like all of those things are really critical. You have to do, I think, two things. Again, right away, establish high level of warmth, like care for your audience, and high level of competence to demonstrate that you know what it is that you're talking about. And we do that by talking about the research and talking and sharing those ideas and applying them there. So that's an answer to the first part of your question. I'll pause here and just get your thoughts on that.
I mean, I'm just singing my song, and it's a great reminder of power of stories, right? Because the stories are such a great way to connect us, and it really is what makes us human. Is, you know, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a wolf, but I don't know if I have a pack of wolves are together. Are they swapping stories, or just probably in the moment? I think our ability to help people visualize through story, and it could cut some of that tension. And again, you said it well. Anxiety and humor don't go well together, right? Like it's a nice way to cut that anxiety, so we can actually start to go after these dragons.
Yeah. The second part of your question, I'm afraid to repeat myself a little bit here, but it goes back to like, what is it that we can do to reduce those dragons, reduce those fears, and the main tools that I use in a workshop on courage there is to do a dragon audit, which is again a risk assessment, and where you're thinking about what's the cost of action, what's the cost of inaction, and also to identify and label your fears and have the conversation. So we can connect these two questions together. We put people in a breakout room to have those conversations with one another. And they realize, and one is there's an element of vulnerability, but sharing this with one another, that they're not alone. And these are very common concerns that most people have. So there's creating that shared community and create that space together, I think goes a long way in helping people not feel alone, feel okay with the vulnerability, and reduce those fears.
You know, I really have enjoyed this little banter, because it's kind of a pinch me moment for me. I mean, you get to meet with really interesting people and like learn from them. I've learned a ton from you. I can totally see how this can be applied. I've already can see a Rui slide in one of my decks about, you know, dragons and whatnot. And I also, you know, you talked about I love your question about, you know, what's at stake really, like if you don't take action on this, and let's call it what it is, folks. Inaction is an action. I mean, if you're choosing not to do something, we're not good at remembering, especially if we're a leader, that it's not just about an inaction that you chose to like not make, an action you chose not to make. You're being watched by your team.
Right.
And if you've hired well and they see you not make a move, that is going to be a ding on you as, we keep talking about this, we're not doing anything.
I think this is, Ryan, such a crucial point, and we can connect it to the previous question as well. As a leader, you know, one of the things that I try to create is environment where courage it's always going to be needed, but it's needed less. And so the question is like, how can I create an environment where people are willing to take interpersonal risks with one another without fearing like they're going to get rejected, ostracized, removed from the group in some capacity. And so an environment where people are feeling psychologically safe enough to raise concerns and share feedback and admit mistakes and so on. Like that's really, really key. So ideally, there's no courage needed in NextArrow internally within our culture, but of course there is, right? There always going to be. But as a leader, that's one of the things that I try to create.
We talk about on our team all the time. Like our job is to make it as safe as possible for people to be courageous, right? Like I think we're saying very similar things, just saying it differently. You know, because you came from academia, or maybe just because you can't help but not. I mean, like if you're gonna have a formula you thought about, as it takes one to know one. Like I know how much I thought about our formula. I know you've deeply thought about your formula. As you think pensively about other applications of courage or how to slay dragons, is there something meaty that you have not totally figured out yet, but you're kind of sparring with that maybe we could talk about?
I think the way that I've been talking about courage in this conversation has been really focused on the individual. And one of the questions here is like, what's the role of the community in courage? So we mentioned one is like leadership is like, how do I reduce the cost of taking those interpersonal risks with one another? I think that's an important question. But if you were to like assemble a team of encouragers, people who help put courage in you, what would that look like? And what role do other people play in helping you become more courageous? You know, we often think about this as a solo act, individual act, the hero. And the hero doesn't do hero things alone. So I think we can start there.
Yeah, I love where your head's at. It's more like the Avengers of courage. And let's also acknowledge, folks, if you're still here 42 minutes in, like this is you. Like you are probably still really curious about this topic. It's no different than everything we've been talking about right today. It's like you get what you focus on. So I do think the more times you stumble into the word courage and you're curious about the word courage, it's probably you. And where I thought you were going, Rui, a little bit as well was, how do you make courage a team sport? It is not an individual thing. It's not swimming, right? It's actually football or basketball. We're finding your starting five and making it a shared mission to slay dragons. Sure feels like the right path. If you had asked me that question, I loved how you actually shared how dragons in some parts of the world mean different things. It's like here, it's we need to slay them, but let's honor what they are over in Asia, right?
For sure. And Ryan, slay them is, of course, the term that we use and the verb, but it's also, as I mentioned, for us internally, one of our values is ride the dragon. It's not slay the dragon, it's ride the dragon. And so for that, you need to like manage those fears, right? You have to manage those anxieties, but you're not necessarily like killing them off because they just share the raw.
We're very aligned on that too. Yeah. It's almost like cracking your self-talk, right? It's like, so I like the ride the dragon. I can only imagine how intentional the nuanced language is. One of the things, Rui, I want to look at, I do want to do like a courage study globally on what countries have the capacity for more courage. You know, you brought up Israel, but also let's bring up like Japan, where honor and respect and legacy really play well there. I'm not, again, this is not to say that Japan has no courage, to be clear. I want to do a study by country on where can courage play really well and maybe where not.
Yes. Yeah, Ryan, we're definitely not going to exclude the land of the samurai and the land without courage. So Ryan, I wanted to ask you a question, if that's okay. When was the last time that you acted courageously?
Okay, man. Wow. Okay. I honestly think the last time, so there is something to be said about new, like when a new experience shows up. And it's so funny, Rui, that you asked this question, because I still get nervous when I take a stage. Like I still like, because I want to do my job. Like I want to like make sure that I'm connecting and I'm landing. I think the last time I really got nervous was at Harvard. We had a chance to lecture at Harvard. I equated a little bit to like just the spirit of music, since you love music. Like the first time the band plays a new album. And it's not the new song with the old stuff where then everyone wants to hear greatest hits and it's like, oh, we gotta like drag through this song before we get back to the good stuff. I felt like we were playing with Headamentals. That talk was primarily about how we need to start talking about self-talk and how, hey, leaders, yes, culture doesn't start in the boardroom. It starts in your brain and what you're saying between your ears, that spin that's happening. So I think the last time for me was probably just a couple weeks ago when we gave that part keynote for the first time with that audience. And it was super surreal too, because it started snowing outside. It was like, this is awesome. It's like all the little moments of sensorial goodness. I think that's probably the last time. I gave a workshop earlier this week, and it was probably the opposite of courage, but it was intimate and warm. And it's like, it makes you realize, I don't know if I'm answering your question. I don't get to do a lot of small stuff anymore. Like 25, like it was awesome too. But the Harvard scenario, that was where I think we've displayed courage the latest.
And what did it look like the resistance, right? And how did you overcome it?
I think the resistance was purely in my own head, which is ironic, right? Because we're talking about self-talk, and they always say you write the book you need, right? So, and what the tool used to overcome it was, at some point we had to start the presentation, and the old here goes nothing. So I think the minute we took action, the minute it was time to go, and I love, like, we start with the Headamentals simulation. It might as well be play, to your point, which sort of takes everyone into an arena where they're dealing with someone who's playing politics at work, and it's causing spin in their head. And like, now you're going to discuss it at your table. So the minute we got into it, and you saw people kind of like have anxiety, but also get excited to talk about it. It was like, we're in, and I'm going to be okay. We're going to be okay. We're off and running.
Yeah. I think that's true for a lot of people when they have some kind of anxiety around, in this case, could be like public speaking or presentations or something along those lines. Like, once you get going, you give it like 30 seconds, you give it 20 seconds, and then you get it out of your system as well, for sure. And you weren't alone. Coming back to like Encourage's Assemble, you were there with your team, which I imagine helped as well.
It did, totally. We've been jamming on courage with Roi Ben-Yehuda. He is the founder of NextArrow. Rui, where can people go learn more about your work and the dragons they should ride?
So nextarrow.org, you can find all the work that we do there, and you can find ways of contacting us. And me individually, it's Roi Ben-Yehuda. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. It's Roi, spelled like return on investment, ROI, and Ben-Yehuda, BEN-YEHUDA.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for joining us. We got to keep talking, because, and when you dig deep enough, there's other parts of that sandbox, as I'm sure you know. So I want to keep learning from you, and maybe every once in a while I got something for you the other way around, and let's keep jamming.
Ryan, it's been a pleasure for sure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.